Carvalho, Chapter 6. Once it so happened that I had to go and see Carvalho. My paddy fields were plagued by a strange variety of pests. It was forest land, and in the first few years, I had suffered losses and faced strange kinds of hardships. At first, the paddy grew to an unusual height, bore big ears, but was full of sap. When we winnowed, even the sound grains flew with the wind and did not even make enough money to pay the harvest hands. This year, my troubles began with transplanting the seedlings. They weren't enough, and added to this, some clever fellow had palmed off a pair of truant bullocks on me. The moment they came under the yoke, they would lie down in the field as if dead. No amount of beating and tail twisting was of any use. Then they would also breathe hard, turn their eyes as if they would pop out of their sockets. I knew it was all play acting. Somehow I had got over all these problems, but now these invisible pests had descended on me. I couldn't see them, but the ears of the paddy would disappear overnight. None of the insecticides sprayed gave any relief. People around said it was the work of some evil spirit. But before giving in to this superstition, I wanted to see Carvalho and discuss the problem with him. One day, I went to his research center. Within, there were hundreds of strange-looking instruments, test tubes and flasks. In their midst was an owlish-looking man smoking a cigarette. "Is Carvalho in?" I asked. Without a word, he pointed his hand towards a door. I went there, and on the door was a nameplate, Professor Carvalho. A thin voice came from within, said, "Come in." I pushed open the door and walked in. Professor Carvalho was making some notes from the files lying in front of him. There was a microscope with two eyepieces on the table. Seeing me, he showed me a chair and said, "Yes." I told him of the problems I had with my crops. He listened with patience and then said, "I'll have to see before I can say anything. When you come next, bring a few specimens. And for the present, you drain away the water from the fields. Possibly these pests live close to the stem and underwater, and therefore your insecticide has been of little use. From what you say, I think they must be army worms. With moustache and beard gone gray and aquiline nose and solemn-looking eyes, Carvalho looked impressive and dignified. He was around 50 years and looked a Christian from Mangalore side. The Kannada he spoke was formal and correct. Like the speech of Mangalore folk, it appeared to me then that Mandana could in no sense be his disciple. Mandana, I thought, must have tried to bluff me. I didn't think it was right for me to waste any more of Carvalho's time, and so stood up, said goodbye, and added, "Sorry if I have bothered you." He began with "Mr." and then almost paternally said, "My dear young man, I hope you don't mean what you said just now. You know I am here to help people, and I do whatever I want. And therefore, you see, you have a right to bother me." If some bureaucrat had mouthed these words, they would have sounded awfully hollow. But Carvalho spoke so sincerely that they sounded genuine. Carvalho's prediction was right. The pests had indeed taken shelter near the stem under the water. When we drained away the water, they dropped off and began to crawl on the wet earth, and then the birds and the frogs and the ants made a feast of them. The remaining ones we sprayed with insecticides and destroyed. But by then they had eaten away more than half the crop. When I went with a few specimens, Carvalho was happy. His guess had proved right. I explained the measures I had taken. He was pleased and asked me to visit the center more often, and also said that I was the only farmer who had sought his advice. This surprised me, and I wondered whether this was the same Carvalho people used to refer to in their talks. But, sir, Lakshmana Gowda, Kari Gowda, Chandra Gowda, Silva, Buddhan Saab, they all speak of you and hold you in high esteem. Do they? But I don't know any of them. We meet in some party or at some gathering and then I forget. There isn't anything common that connects us, you see? And since I'm the only gadgeted officer around, they make me chair or all sorts of meeting. You know, I was to preside over the August 15th celebrations and a minister was to attend it. But what could I, a man of science, have to say on such occasions? So you were to preside over the function. Yes, yes, but my daughter suddenly took ill and I had to go to Bombay. It was good, sir, that you went away to Bombay. And then I described the happenings of that day, including Mandana rolling down with the drum. Carvalho rolled with laughter. So that scoundrel is in the scout movement also, is he? You know him, sir. Of course, I know him well. He's a wonderful fellow, and in a way, my disciple. You bastard, what discipleship do you do with a professor like Carvalho, who confesses he doesn't even know the big people of a town? I wondered within myself. Carvalho said the bees must have been annoyed by the sound of the beating drums. Because, you see, in India, we don't have bees which attack without some provocation. A particular type called Mau bees in South Africa behave that way. A little later, I left. The next day, Mandana appeared with a big gunny bag on his shoulder. It was heavy, and a reddish liquid was trickling down his back from it. I looked at him quizzically. He read my thoughts and said, "Ah, sir, look, this is A1 pork. The fat itself is 6 inches thick and tastes like dry copra. You can eat it without frying." Saliva dripped down the corner of his mouth as he continued. You know, I supply pork to Carvalho also. I gave him some money and he went away. Then it struck me this explains why he is so dear to Carvalho. In what other way could this ash of a mandana be of any use to him? I asked myself. But I was wrong. When I went after a week or so to see Carvalho, the owl-faced Nagaraj with soda bottle glasses on his nose said that Carvalho had applied for a week's leave and gone somewhere with Mandana.